Hey everybody, Mike with Games Play Badly, and on this episode of Session Zero, I'm talking about miniatures and a miniature game that I think you're really gonna love. It's not something where you have to invest a ton of money into it. It's miniature agnostic, so you can use any miniatures you want, and it all revolves around Greek mythology. If that interests you, stay tuned. That interview starts now. Hey Chris, how are you?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Very good. Thanks for coming on. We've been talking a little bit about this. I'm super excited about this because it's something we've never really done on the channel. But you actually have a physical mini game called Demigod that you produced, which I got a hold of it. I took a look at it and I really liked it, and I thought it was very very interesting. And it's based on Greek mythology.
Yep.
The game, the way it works is you start with a main hero, which is basically the person that all of your other supporting actors are supporting. And then
Yep.
you have mini heroes, and then you have minions. And these are all physical miniatures that you'll be playing with using your system. Why don't you tell me about that?
Sure. Um, so a lot of the nucleus for the demigod development came out of a game that I played a ton of called Frostgrave.
Mhm.
Um, and Frostgrave is a little similar in that you have a wizard, you have an apprentice, you have minions. So you have your major hero is the wizard, your minor hero is the apprentice, and then you've got, your minions.
Mhm.
But there wasn't anything like that for like Greek mythology, for
Mhm.
those like mythological tall tales. And it just called out to me like, I can't believe, nobody's written a system that lets me, play through killing the Minotaur or play through killing Medusa,
Mhm.
something like that. And so I sat down and wrote one.
Very good. Greek mythology is always something that I really enjoyed, especially as a child, because we were, as part of the curriculum here in Illinois, we had to go through Greek mythology. I'm not sure if it's the same way across the country. So have you always been a mythology fan?
I have. It's kind of shifted, front burner, back burner as I've gotten older. But I remember one of my favorite books as a kid. I forget who exactly read it off the top of my head, but it was an illustrated guide to mythology.
Mhm.
And so it took you kind of through different sections. So it had like creation myths, it had the end of the world myths, but it gave them to you in all the different cultures. So it gave
Mhm.
you like Finnish mythology, it gave you Japanese mythology, it gave you like some of the Native American myths, it gave you uh, a lot of the myths that you don't necessarily really see
Mhm.
in like widespread teaching.
Sure.
So like we don't really hear about Native American myth in when you get taught a mythology class. It's
Mhm.
really Greek and Roman, and that's it from
Right,
my
right.
recollection.
That's all. That's fascinating. So, from the standpoint of the game itself, you're you play on a table with physical miniatures and terrain, and in the book, it actually details how to lay things out, and then you also lay out monsters for yourself to fight
Yep.
as well. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
So that was really born out of my desire to give people a game that didn't necessarily need a second player.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like a lot of the like skirmish, warband, like small scale games, so Kill Team,
Mhm.
Necromunda, all of those, they depend on having a second player. Well, what if you're in an area where, oh, I want to play Kill Team, oh, I want to play Necromunda. Nobody plays Kill Team and Necromunda.
Mhm.
You're SOL.
Right.
So I wanted to write a system where from jump you could pick up the book and play it by yourself. So
Very good.
almost all of, and I think there's like one encounter I have to go back and rewrite to be a little more clear, for like a second edition. Almost all of the encounters give you ways that your major and minor monsters will react to you as a player.
Hmm. So now,
And
is this now was this game created as a more of a solo project? As in, basically a one-person game, or is it it's built for more players, correct?
Yes. So, it's built to be, two-player against each other. So
Mhm,
you have, two players duking it out to be who can kill the Minotaur first, who can kill Medusa first.
mhm,
But if you don't have that second player, there's enough of a framework in there
mhm.
that you could set up a 4x4 board, set up a Minotaur miniature, set up your heroes, and go.
Very good. As it would have in the time, gods are important in this because they give you various boons that you can use on the battlefield. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So really the driving force for that was kind of echoing how the Greeks and the peoples of those eras dealt with their gods. You prayed to the gods and hoped that they would intercede on your behalf.
Mhm,
Um, and so you notice like there's not really spells like you would have in like D&D or something like that. No one is a spellcaster. You find spells that you can cast. So there's a scrolls table, there's a potions table, and those are really the limits of your magic, unless you're a major hero and you can call up, Daddy Zeus or Daddy Hades or Daddy Poseidon and say, "Hey, can you go do XYZ for me?"
mhm,
Uh, and there's a system in there of divine favor points. You'll get to, the end of your God's rope, and they'll say, "No, I can't or don't want to help you anymore
mhm,
because you're not you're not giving me enough to be like you're not giving me enough to justify me stepping in."
mhm. So you have a finite amount of uses for those boons that they're gonna give you.
Yeah.
So I think that adds an interesting mechanic to the game, because again, you said, they're not real true spellcasters. You do have magical items, as you mentioned, but being able to call upon your deity to go ahead and help a brother out is a unique mechanic, and I think it's actually theater of the mind for me. I think that's pretty epic.
Yeah. And I wanted to step away from the D&D type where, and again, referencing one of the games I used as inspiration is Frostgrave.
Mhm,
And Frostgrave deals with being a wizard and an apprentice going through a magical city and trying to, get treasure and all of that. But because you're a wizard, you can just throw spells around willy-nilly.
mhm,
And I didn't really want that feeling. I wanted players to get nitty-gritty. I wanted them to be like, "Oh no, I've used up my last boon. Now I'm gonna have to pull my sword or pull my spear and
mhm.
go charge the big gribbly monster and hope I come out alive."
Mhm, mhm. What I also like about that, it's almost like historical in quotes, reenactment of some of these famous battles that you've read about in mythology.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because the driving, uh, like, player agency or, it's called the Trials of Heracles is the expansion that I'm coming out with. The driving player agency there is that King Eurystheus, the guy who gave Hercules the labors, has called you guys up and said, "Hey, I gave Hercules all these labors so that he could, atone for his sins, yada, yada, yada. Make sure he doesn't get them done."
Mhm,
And so it's presenting you firmly in the shoes of the bad guys because you're going there ahead of time. And so if everything goes up without a hitch, by the time Hercules gets there, there's not going to be a Learned Hydra. There's not going to be an enemy in line. You guys have gotten there first.
that will be fun. Yeah, yeah.
But honestly, what drove me to write this was I was a big historicals fan, like
Mhm,
historical miniatures. Historicals comparatively to like 40K are dirt cheap. So you
mhm,
can get, a box of hot blades, which is, 40 hot blades for $40.
mhm,
So I was like, what if I wrote a game that you could, buy this box of hot blades, you got 40 of them,
mhm,
and if you assemble them right, there's your warband right there. And you've spent, $8 on it because you've bought the $40 box and you've got 32 of them left.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and now that's, outside of the book, that's your outlay.
Yeah, that's always a great thing. I mean, and not to knock, okay, yeah, it's to knock, Games Workshop and all their stuff. It's cost prohibitive. The barrier to adoption is so high,
Yeah,
when it comes to buying, anything with Warhammer. I like the idea that you're thinking about what people can get cheaply and what they can use and still have a great time with it, and especially if you're a historicals fan, you're gonna have a great time with this stuff anyway because you got a chance to put together some of these legendary figures and some of these armies, and it didn't cost you an arm and a leg.
yeah,
So, this is miniature agnostic, so you can use whatever miniatures you have available to play.
yes.
Are you gonna be producing, STL files and things like that for folks to be able to download and print themselves?
So that is the plan down the line. I'm actually going to a convention in June or July. I think it's the 27th of June or the 27th of July. I forget which month it is. But the day after I get back from that, so the 28th, I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter that gets, the physical book out there,
Mhm.
and gets all of the infrastructure set up so that people can buy the physical book. Um, but then I'm also in talks with a company to get a minimum of 2, for, the Kickstarter tiers to a maximum of 7, depending on, how many stretch goals I get,
Mhm.
miniatures produced.
Very good. So what I did notice that was a little similar when you start talking about, Warhammer in general is the way in which, you create or craft your team, because your team is based off of obviously, you have your main hero and you have supporting characters behind that, but you use a term called drachma, which is a currency. So you basically have 500 drachma to go ahead and buy the additional, units that you want, and those units are based off of, not only what they can do, but, what deities they patronize or what deities patronize them, which gives them special powers, correct?
Yep, yep. Um, and so that the system there was really one to give players, this is enough to get you out of the gate,
Mhm,
but also to incentivize not just completing the quest, but also searching for loot and things like that. Because if you look further through the book, there's a loot table for finding like actual loot tokens on the board, and there's a system for setting those up uh, and saying, okay, I'm in the Minotaur's mix. There's, been a bunch of heroes who come here before me and
mhm.
met their doom. They've left stuff behind. That looks like a shiny piece of armor right there. I'm going to snag it and take it home with me.
Sure.
Uh,
Well, that's one of the more unique, aspects of this game is you're actually leveling your characters.
yeah. Yep. And I,
That's
I wanted to make it a leveling system that wasn't just, oh, I've hit 100 experience points. Let me check that off as a checkbox.
mhm,
I wanted it to be something that players, sat down and made a conscious choice of what do I want this hero to do? Do I want him to be, somebody that just goes and gets the treasure off the board? Do
mhm,
I want him to be my guy that dukes it out with the big bad monsters?
mhm.
Is he more of someone that, just like hides behind the pillars and waits until the shouting stops?
You're right.
Uh, so there's really a system in there for setting up your heroes the way that you want in terms of like their stats and things like that and how you want to level them. But then there's also an injury table, not just for your heroes, but for your minions.
Mhm,
So if you get, dealt enough damage that you get taken off the board, you roll on the injury table. So like somebody might lose an eye, somebody might lose a hand,
mhm.
somebody might, shatter their leg. And it's this balancing act of, oh, I have these great heroes, but they're not full-fledged gods yet. They can't just, take an arrow to the face and shrug it off.
Mhm, mhm. It's a very unique system from the standpoint of most miniature games, you sit down, you play, and then that's it. Somebody wins and you kind of clear the board and that's at the end of it. But there's some persistence to gameplay in between and in session itself, from the standpoint of being able to level and customize the characters that you're playing with. So that way, I would imagine you keep track of that for the next time that you play.
Yep. And there is actually in the back of the book, there is a character sheet that you can print off um, that lets you, write down, I have hero A, B, and C, and
Hmm.
all of these minions. These are what they're carrying. These are what their injuries might be. This is how much gold I have left. There's a system in there for setting up like a home base.
Hmm.
Um, and there's different like ways that you can set that up.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I'm a big miniature person. I don't know. I paint lots of miniatures, and we've been playing Warhammer, and so I mean those types of games are something that kind of right up my alley. That sounds like a lot of fun. I like the idea again that persistence in gameplay is something I've always found very interesting because you'll go through and you'll try and put 1,000 point army together or 5,000 point army or whatever it is for Warhammer or whatever game you're playing, only to see it all destroyed and you're kind of done at the end of it. So I also like that there's some solo gameplay aspects to it as well. So that way, if one of the biggest things with Warhammer is I know so many people who collect the miniatures and paint them, but they never play. So it's
Yeah.
nice having that option to actually just play by yourself if you want to.
Yeah. And that was something that I really sat down and thought about from like a solo play aspect was what's the minimum outlay that I want someone to have. Um, so like if you take the Minotaur's Maze, which is the first scenario in the book, the maximum you need there is 4 miles. You need
Hmm.
your major hero, your minor hero, or excuse me, you need your major hero, 2 minor heroes, and that's your party. You're good to go.
Hmm.
And then you need a Minotaur and enough, blocking terrain that the Minotaur's not just making a beeline for everybody as you set the board up.
Hmm. Right, right, right. How long? I mean, this is very creative. How long did it take you to kind of get this to market?
I want to say 2 years. I had gotten the beta rules done uh, 6 months ago, longer than that. Um, and then I released the actual game like to the public November of last year.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the beta rules were done. I want to actually say January of last year, and then I put the actual game out to the public in November of last year.
Very, very cool. And this convention that's coming up is at a museum in your area,
Yep,
and it's a board game day, and so that's really exciting. I'll have information to that down below. So if you want to meet Chris and play his game, you can go out there and meet him.
that'd be great. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be great.
absolutely. And this game is available now for purchase. So if you'd like to, you can get the PDF version of it. The Kickstarter that you're going to be launching is more if you want a hardcover version, and you'll get a couple miniatures with it as well to kind of inspire your gameplay.
Yep,
Um, do you have any thought process of bringing this outside of Greek mythology?
I do actually. So I've started Greek mythology is really kind of the starting ground for it, but there are plans to do Norse mythology and then allow you to bring like a Norse band of heroes in.
Hmm.
Um, there's plans to do a little bit of Egyptian mythology and then
Hmm.
bring, Egyptian heroes in. And that's really what I have so far,
Okay.
uh, just because those are the big, really mythologies of that area and that period.
Hmm.
Um, like I could do Roman mythology as something to do, but that's a lot of that is more, Greek mythology with the serial numbers filed off.
Hmm.
Like all the names are changed, but a lot of those myths are still, for the most part, the same. Uh, and really, what I want to do there is give players the ability to have those fun fights of, oh, I have 8 Greek hoplites and they're facing down a giant,
Uh-huh.
or I have a bunch of Vikings facing down a Minotaur.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's really kind of the driving goal there of giving players the ability to have those fun fights of intermingling those mythologies,
Mhm,
where you might have, a group of hoplites at Ragnarok, or you have a bunch of Vikings trying to kill Medusa,
mhm.
and just giving players those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about now doesn't even really scratch the surface of the book because I went through you've been incredibly detailed in loot tables and all sorts of things. Every miniature is going to have stats. You can pick up items. You can all sorts of various things. So I mean, for those of you who are interested in anything that we're saying, I would suggest picking it up because there's so much packed into this book. I can't even go through it all, and it's much more than just a miniature based game. It's taking miniature based games and it's on steroids because of all the additional stuff that you've added into it. And I found it fascinating. I'm looking forward to playing with all I have all these miniatures and I'm not using them. So now I have a reason to use them.
And if you guys do play it, I'd love to see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll talk to my husband and see if he wants to play and we'll go ahead and make a video of it.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I loved everything about it. I think it's fantastic. For anybody who's interested in picking this up, I'll have the links down below, as well as links to any appearances that you're going to be at, which is again this museum event. And I can't wait to see how everything is produced. The artwork is good too, and so I can't wait to see it in a physical book. That'd be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to try it out myself.
Can't wait to see you try it out, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you coming on and best of luck.
Thank you much.